How I faced betrayal and manipulation. That almost ended everything. You'll be surprised. I never imagined something like this could happen to me. I always thought my marriage with Raphael was strong, solid, built on love and respect. But one afternoon, I realized something was wrong. I felt a restlessness I couldn't quite explain, as if my instincts were trying to warn me of something. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a bad phase, a passing phase. But little by little, my doubts began to grow, and I could no longer pretend everything was okay. I'm Bruna. I'm 32 years old, and on that hot October day, I discovered a truth that changed everything in my life. That's when I saw a strange movement in Raphael's account, a large transfer to someone I didn't know. My heart raced, fear took over, and I knew this was just the beginning of what was to come. I spent hours trying to process it. I didn't want to believe it, but everything pointed to betrayal, even if it wasn't. Exactly in the traditional way one imagines. Raphael was distant, too distant, and the transfer was just one more piece of evidence that something was wrong. I felt lost, alone, invaded. I loved that man, and I felt betrayed not only by the money but by the silence, the lies, the lack of consideration. The worst part was that the one on his side was Livia, my adoptive sister-in-law, his sister. I always thought we were a close family, but in that moment I realized it was all a facade. That sister I thought I could trust was destroying my life, trying to invade the space that was just mine and Raphael's. And he, whom I loved, didn't seem to care. That day, when I finally confronted Raphael, he tried to justify the transfer, saying it was to help his sister. The excuse was weak, and I knew it. He was trying to protect himself, but he was also leaving me unprotected. I felt anger, sadness, fear, the fear of losing everything, of being alone, of no longer knowing who to trust, the rage, of seeing someone I loved being manipulated by someone else. I felt like an intruder in my own home. It was the first time I realized how much Livia's manipulation was destroying my marriage. I wanted him to fight with me, to defend us, but he seemed trapped, confused, and that made me even more desperate. It wasn't easy to make the decision to act. I felt ashamed, afraid of others' judgment, afraid of exposing my private life to family, friends, the world. But the silence was worse. I couldn't continue living with that doubt, that anguish, that constant feeling of invasion. I decided to seek help, tell my closest friends, and seek a lawyer. I no longer wanted to be the woman who swallows everything silently, who pretends not to see to avoid causing a storm. I needed proof. I needed support to face not only Raphael, but also his entire family, who initially tried to portray me as the villain. But I couldn't give up what was rightfully mine: my peace, my marriage, my dignity. From that day on, everything changed. I began investigating, gathering evidence, protecting my space and my mind. I had to deal with threats, manipulation, and invasions of privacy. Livia didn't want me to find out, didn't want me to have control of the situation. But I was stronger than she imagined. Every step I took to rebuild my life was a victory over fear, shame, and pain. I felt heartbroken, but with each challenge, I grew stronger. The feeling of being alone was overwhelming, but I didn't let it paralyze me. It was my life, my story, and I decided to write a different ending. I decided that despite the betrayal, the pain, and the manipulation, I would rise above it. In the days that followed that decision, what struck me most was the silence in the house. Previously full of conversation and laughter, it became a place where I could only hear my own thoughts, and sometimes the sound of the door as he tried to close behind him. I felt a mixture of relief and anguish. Relief at having stopped pretending, at accepting what was hurting me, but also anguish at seeing that the man I loved was increasingly distant, trapped in a web he himself couldn't unravel. I no longer wanted to live in that comfortable lie, where Raphael hid from reality and Livia controlled everything. It was incredibly difficult to accept that they had more power over my feelings than I did. I felt invisible, betrayed, and at the same time compelled to be strong to keep from falling apart. It was as if every unspoken word, every blank look from him, was a knife in my chest. That's when I started seeking help outside of home. My friends were my safe haven. They listened to my outbursts without judgment, helped me put the pieces together, encouraged me to fight, to not give up. With them, I learned that my pain didn't define me. that I could emerge from that situation and build something new. I didn't need to hide behind fear or shame. I needed to be the protagonist of my own story. I also began to understand that Livia's betrayal wasn't just against me. It was a silent destruction of Raphael, who was trapped in a toxic and manipulative relationship. This didn't justify anything, but it helped me see the bigger picture and not lose compassion for him, even with everything that happened. My fight wasn't just against them. It was for myself, for my respect, and for my peace. During this process, I had to face much more than I imagined. His family, especially his parents, didn't support me at first. They tried to justify Livia, minimize her actions, and treated me as if I were to blame for the whole mess. It was a hard blow to my self-esteem. I felt isolated, unprotected, as if I were fighting alone against a huge wall. But the truth is that, over time, the evidence I gathered began to open everyone's eyes. His parents saw that their adopted daughter was crossing boundaries that could no longer be ignored, that the manipulations and invasions weren't just in my head. They changed. Their tune started supporting me, and, more importantly, protecting my marriage and my integrity. This was crucial for me not to give up, knowing that, even if it was little by little, I had allies. The hardest battle was dealing with Livia's manipulation. She didn't want to lose control. She tried to mess with my head, threatening me with things she knew would deeply affect me. She tried to make me feel guilty, making me question everything I felt. I had to learn to close my ears to these lies, to trust my perception and what I knew to be real. It wasn't easy. Many nights I cried alone, feeling like I was being attacked from all sides. But little by little, I became stronger. I understood that those who try to bring you down are those who are afraid of your strength, that trying to control your life is a way of admitting they have no power over you. And there, in that moment, I decided I would stay strong, no matter what. The turning point came when I was able to take everything to court. Bringing the screenshots, the messages, the documents, the evidence of financial fraud, the invasions of privacy. Seeing that everything I felt and suffered had a name, a consequence, was liberating. I was saying enough, making it clear that I would no longer accept being passed over, that I would no longer allow my dignity to be trampled upon. And in that court, I felt more alive than ever. It was the first day in a long time that I looked in the mirror and recognized the strong woman who was there, willing to fight for herself. From that moment on, nothing was the same. The process was long, painful, but necessary. I wasn't alone in my defense. I was for all the women who have experienced such betrayal, for everyone who has had to face manipulation in the name of love. After that day in court, I began to feel a different strength growing within me. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a sudden burst. It was a slow process, full of ups and downs. I still felt that mix of pain, anger, fear, and shame, but I also felt a clarity I hadn't felt before. I understood that I wasn't a helpless victim, that I could fight for what was mine, and that I didn't need to hide. Raphael didn't deserve my silence, nor my hidden sadness. I needed to reconnect with myself, with my values, and with my inner strength. I began taking small actions that, together, gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in a long time. I went for walks, went to places I liked, and started taking better care of, myself, as if I were telling my body and mind that I deserved to be happy. Rebuilding didn't happen overnight. I had to learn to deal with the memories, with what I'd experienced and what I'd lost. Sometimes, I'd find myself looking at old photos, remembering good times, and wondering how it had ended that way. The pain of realizing that someone you love can do so much harm is a pain that can't be explained. But instead of wallowing in it, I used it as fuel to avoid repeating the same mistakes. I needed to take care of myself so that no one could invade my space again. It was a process that required a lot of therapy, a lot of self-talk, a lot of patience. I wasn't in a rush. I knew I needed to give it time, but I couldn't let it be just for healing. It needed to be for strengthening me too. The support of my friends and family was crucial during this time. I knew I didn't have to carry that cross alone. With them, I could laugh again, have fun, go out, and feel that my life could have moments of lightness, even if only for a short time. These small escapes from the pain were like respites, and I needed them to stay strong. I also began to realize that, despite the betrayal, I could still trust the right people, that there were still good people in the world, and that made all the difference. I was learning that life goes on, that love can exist in other forms, even self-love. This discovery was perhaps the greatest gift I received from everything I experienced. During this time, I realized I didn't need to carry resentment to move forward. It wasn't easy. I still feel angry sometimes, still sad, but resentment only consumed me and distanced me from my peace. So I started working on empathy, understanding that Raphael was also a victim of a toxic relationship with his sister, that he was manipulated and also lost his way. This didn't erase what he did, nor did it take away my pain, but it helped me move forward without carrying an even heavier burden. I needed to take care of myself, and that meant forgiving, not for the other person, but for myself. Realizing this was liberating. Today, I'm still on this path, but I feel that each step makes me lighter, stronger, more myself. The feeling I'm left with is that, even in the midst of chaos, it's possible to find oneself. That even when it seems like everything is falling apart, there's still a strength within us capable of rebuilding each broken piece. I know my story isn't unique, but it's mine, and it's with it that I carry on. Scars and all, but alive, strong, and ready for whatever comes. I still have fears, doubts, and insecurities, but I'm no longer ashamed to admit it. What I went through taught me to be human, imperfect, and resilient. And above all, it taught me that, despite the pain, it's possible to overcome and rebuild your life. You just have to take the first step, and I did. When I began to look back at that day when everything blew up in my face, I realized how much I had changed. I was no longer the same person who stood there, confused and broken in the midst of that storm. What felt like an end was actually a beginning. The beginning of putting myself first, of establishing my boundaries, and of learning to trust myself again. In that defining moment, I realized I could no longer live in the shadow of betrayal and manipulation. The decision to act was what saved me, even though I still felt a heavy mix of pain and hope. I wished that story had ended differently, but I couldn't control other people's choices, only my own. One of the hardest steps was accepting that Raphael wasn't ready to join me on this journey of rebuilding. As much as I still loved him, I had to understand that some people can't face their own ghosts, and that this didn't make me any less worthy of love and respect. This acceptance hurt more than any betrayal, because it meant giving up a dream I'd built together with him. It was then that I understood that my worth didn't depend on his presence or support. I needed to learn to love myself alone, to be whole without needing anyone else to complete my story. This doesn't mean I didn't want a family or love, but that I first needed to be whole to be able to build something healthy. My relationship with his family also changed significantly. After all the chaos, they distanced themselves from Livia and began to truly support me. This was a huge relief, because at that moment I felt isolated and judged. Seeing that Raphael's parents, who had previously tried to justify their adopted daughter's behavior, were able to see the truth and reach out to me made a huge difference. It was confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts weren't wrong, and that there were people who believed in my struggle. It wasn't an easy path. There were many arguments, hurt feelings, and mistrust, but the truth spoke louder. This support was one of the pillars that sustained me when it seemed like everything was falling apart. Still, the biggest challenge was rebuilding my self-confidence. I spent a lot of time doubting my perception, thinking I was overreacting, or that I was responsible for what was happening. Livia's manipulation was so subtle and persistent that it almost made me lose track of what was real. Regaining my mental and emotional clarity was a daily struggle. I had to learn to trust what I felt, to prioritize myself, to stand up for myself without fear. Little by little, this strength grew, and I came to understand that confidence isn't something you regain overnight, but rather that it can be rebuilt with patience, care, and a lot of courage. Today, looking back on everything I've experienced, I feel a mixture of sadness for what was lost, but also pride for everything I've achieved. I know I still have many battles ahead, that some wounds will take time to heal, but the most important thing is that I'm no longer a hostage to that situation. I've found a path, to my own freedom, to my own peace. And that's what keeps me going every day. I've learned that overcoming pain isn't the absence of pain, but the ability to move forward despite it. And I continue, with my scars, with renewed strength, and with the certainty that I'm capable of starting over as many times as necessary. There are still days when the pain hits hard, I won't lie. Sometimes I find myself reliving those conversations, the lies, the feeling of invasion. But over time, I've learned to deal with it differently. I no longer let the past consume me, but instead, I use those memories to strengthen me and not repeat the same mistakes. It's as if each painful memory has become a brick in the construction of my new life. Today, when I look back, I see that all of that, as bad as it was, taught me to be stronger, more attentive, and more in control of myself. It's a wound that still exists, but it no longer bleeds like it used to. I know that the journey of overcoming has no set end, that it's made up of cycles, and that some moments are more difficult than others. But I feel prepared to face them now. I'm aware of my worth and know that I deserve respect and true love. I've learned not to be afraid to ask for help, to lean on the people who care about me, and to not accept less than I deserve. My marriage is over, and it hurts to admit it, but I've understood that I can't build anything healthy with someone who doesn't want to fight alongside me. Today, I respect myself enough to say no when something hurts me, and to choose to be with those who truly value me. What I hope most is that my story can help someone going through something similar. I know how difficult it is to feel betrayed, manipulated, and discredited, but I want you to know that there is a way out, that you don't have to accept this pain as fate. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to carry guilt that isn't yours. Seeking help, trusting yourself, and taking action can be scary, but it's the path to rediscovering freedom and peace. Life is so much more than suffering in silence. It's possible to bounce back, even if you still have scars. And this is just the beginning of your new story. I'm still discovering myself in this new phase, learning to live alone, to take care of myself, and to love myself in a way I never had before. It's far from perfect, because I still have my insecurities and difficult days, but I'm proud of every step I've taken to get here. I know my strength didn't come from a magical place. It came from my desire to not let the pain destroy me, the desire to be happy again, even if in a different form, without that person I once thought would be forever. And it's this desire that I cling to, because it's what keeps me going. If I could tell myself one thing that day, it would be to not be afraid, to trust my own instincts more, and to believe that even when everything seems lost, we can rebuild. We can be stronger than any betrayal, any manipulation, or any unsupportive family. I am living proof of this. And even though the wound still exists, today I choose to take care of myself, respect myself, and move forward. Because I deserve it. Because my life is worth much more than any suffering. And this is my truth, my victory, and my hope. My